and we are taking a session on CAT 2019, the strategy session for the quantitative aptitudes section of the CAT 2019. And since we are in the last week, as you know, we are talking about what structures and what preparation strategies one should keep if one is interested in cracking the CAT this year. So, of course, your strategy will depend on what you are targeting to do in the quant section. I mean, any strategy depends essentially on the targets. So the first thing you need to finalize is, or you need to define, is what are you targeting? Are you targeting a section on which you are going offensive? Is quants offensive for you? Offensive, I mean, are you trying to develop your just give me a second. Yeah, so are you going on the offensive in quants? That means, are you going to use this to qualify the exam? Are you going normal on quants, or are you going defensive on quants? Are you saying कि नहीं quants में मेरा target है कि मैं अपना score को harm नहीं होने दूं? So that obviously depends on your skill level. What you're going to try to achieve. But there's, given these facts also, there are certain aspects of your prep process or of your taking the exam, which does not change. So in today's session, I'm talking about two things to you. One part of what I'll be talking about with you today is going to be about what you should do in the last 7 days. And the second part of what we'll be focusing on, what you should do in the last 7 days, is one part of it. And the second part of what we'll be focusing on is your D-Day strategy. What are you going to do in that 1 hour? How are you going to be spending your time in that 1 hour that you're going to spend in that exam? Two dimensions of it: last 7 days, work-wise, and the D-Day strategy. So what are you targeting in the last 7 days? What are your objectives in the last 7 days? What are your targets for the last 7 days? So if you look at that, the first dimension of your target is, what are you looking at revising? Revise, review. So since this is a session essentially quants part, so in QA, your target in the last 7 days should be to quickly flowchart and go through, redo, or you can call it redo, or you can call it visit. Making in this 20 seconds is going to be a huge aspect of your outcome in terms of the score. So you need to work on last 1 week. Of course, you can't work on, one thing should be clear to you: last 1 week, nobody can work on improving skills, so to say. Your skills are now stagnant. Right? It's not going to happen that you study a chapter today and your skills in that chapter are going to go up in 6 days' time. Unlikely to happen. Although it can be done on a couple of chapters. But if you're still left with a few chapters now, that clearly means that you have missed the bus for the year. So no new skill work, and hence no new questions. in quants. You are not solving any new question in quants, except if you are left with some CAT questions of the past. Then you can be doing that, but otherwise you're going to avoid any kind of new questions in the exam, right? So the most important structure or the most important construct on the D-Day is going to be your decision making in these 20 seconds. And the quality of the decision making you do, the quality of the decision making you have here is going to determine your outcomes. It's very much like a sportsman. I mean, Virat Kohli is a great batsman, but there are days on which he gets out on zero, right? So it does not mean that his skill has gone down. His skill remains where it is. His skill is still high. But what went down on that particular day was this outcome or his performance. So just like any sportsman who has skill levels, just like any sportsman who has skill levels and performance levels, every CAT aspirant has skill levels and performance levels. Every CAT aspirant has skill levels and performance levels. And while your skill work is over now for the year, you can still do a lot to affect your performance on that day. And the first dimension, so last week's, my advice to you on the last week is essentially going to be last week performance or last week advice is essentially going to be on on things that you can actually make a difference to while I'm just trying to see your chats also coming to me. So your last week, yeah. So your last week work has to be obviously focused on managing your performance. And your performance is dependent on the first 20 seconds of decision making that you have once you see the exam. So that's the first part of it. I hope you guys can see my broadcast. Yeah, so things are going okay, right? So your last week performance, last week focus has to be on performance related aspects, and the first part of it, as I said, is invest in your flowcharting ability. If you have sharp flowcharts on that day, if you have sharp flowcharts on the day, on the D-Day, hi movie clip, hello Hindi, hello to you. So if your flowcharting ability is strong and sharp on that day, you can actually make a difference of at least 3 to 5 questions in your decision making. Because what flowcharting does is it does two things. One is, and of course, knowing that okay, once you decide on the flowchart and you know that okay, if I do these steps, मेरा answer आने वाला है, so it removes the uncertainty in whether I should do this question or not, and helps better decision making in the exam, better scores. The second part, the second aspect of what you do to prepare yourself to improve your performance on the D-Day is more psychological. And as you have to be aware, even if you're not aware right now, I'm quite sure most of you will be aware of this. But what you have to understand is that the CAT is a very psychological exam. There's a lot of psychology involved in the way you take this exam. Because what they do inside the exam, essentially, and I'm quite sure you must have felt this while preparing for this exam and while taking a mock test, that, and this is something that a lot of students report to me, sir, when I solve inside the test, So the question is not doable for me. I can't do the question. When I solve the same question later, then I find that the question was easy. वो आराम से निकल जाता है. और इस तरह का अगर आपके साथ हो रहा है, this is happening to you, then this is clear indication that while your skill levels are good enough to solve the question, अगर skill level नहीं होता तो बाद में भी नहीं होता question, तो तुम्हारा skill level ठीक है, लेकिन तुम्हारा performance level completely missing. और performance हटाने के लिए तुमको अपने मन से performance ठीक करने के लिए you'll have to remove the fear from your mind. So that's your second part of the programming of the last week. The fear removal. Now, I know a lot of you out there are currently thinking about the D-Day and are shaking in your boots because of the fact that you are very scared of what's going to happen on that day. And this mindset or this attitude, if you're going to carry on the day of the exam, it's not going to work for you. It's going to be counterproductive. And hence you have to make sure that you come out of this fear psychosis that is gripping you. In my estimate, in my last 25 years of experience of training people, thank you, Dead Joker. I'm hesitating in calling your name, but let's just call you Joker. Even that's a funny name. Thank you so much. If you found LR and DI books awesome, that's nice to hear. And I just try to do my work well, and I try to make sure that I have done my part of the business with respect to my writing qualitatively strong, and if that takes care of itself, everything else takes care of himself. And right now I'm in a YouTube channel broadcast talking about last week's strategy for CAT 2019. As you can see the topic on your left. So my last week's strategy, my advice to you is focus on the fear removal. Now how do you do fear removal? So what do I not want in the exam from you? What do I want you to avoid? When I talk about fear removal. So you're going to face this situation. Let's say we are talking about the quant section. You face this question in front of you. Is the question versus your mind. It's a 1:1 battle. Right? Straight on, head-on battle between the question and your mind. And your mind, instead of focusing on the question, is gripped by negative or even positive emotions. I often tell my students, any kind of emotions in your mind is wrong, it's bad. You get too happy in the exam, that's also wrong. You will make mistakes. Of course, the bigger problem is the negative emotions. So if your mind is gripped by the negative emotions, especially negative emotions of anxiety, fear, restlessness, palpitations, if that's happening in your mind, and you're facing this question, the problem is that there's a trained part of your mind. There's a part of your mind that was trained. There's a trained part of your mind, and that trained part of the mind, which is capable of doing this question, most likely, if you're prepared well, that part of the mind is impacted and it is not available completely for you because you have been engulfed by negative emotions. So all the training you have done, all the practice you have done is not available to you here. And this is the biggest reason why I see students getting stuck between, as I said, question exam में किए नहीं, बाहर किए हो गया, easily हो गया, outside it was done easily. Hi Jyoti, that's good to hear. So, and thank you for the LR and DI book compliment, and I hope you like the quants and the verbal books also. And so ये वाला प्रॉब्लम अगर तुमको हो रहा है, आई एम क्वाइट श्योर इफ यू आर टेकिंग अ मॉक टेस्ट ज्योति, यू आल्सो फेसिंग दिस बिकॉज एवरीबडी फेसेस दिस. तो इसका सिंपल सॉल्यूशन इज कैंसलिंग आउट ऑल द इमोशंस. नाउ इट्स नॉट एन ईजी थिंग टू डू. अगर इतना ईजी रहता सब लोग कर लेते, लेकिन फंडामेंटली if you don't cancel out all the emotions, let me just move this to this side. I think my photo is obstructing parts of what I'm writing here. So if you do not allow your trained mind to come to the exam, then your chances of qualification go down, or at least your chances of doing the stuff that you are supposed to do in the test go down drastically. So how do you get rid of all the emotions? What should you do in the last week? My advice, if you're interested, is dissociate yourself from the result. You tell yourself that result कुछ भी होने दो, I'll deal with it. I'm okay with the result. Let me dissociate with the result. Right? And this you'll have to do this for CAT 20 also, Jyoti. रिजल्ट कुछ भी होने दो, आई डील विद इट. रिजल्ट अच्छा होगा तो आई डील विद इट, आई बी हैप्पी. रिजल्ट खराब होगा तो भी मैं डील कर लूँगा. एंड दिस एक्चुअली अ फैक्ट. यू टेल मी वन थिंग इज, ज्योति यू आर गिविंग CAT 20, द अदर पीपल हियर हु आर गिविंग CAT 19. सपोज तुम्हारा रिजल्ट खराब हो गया. नाउ इन 2019, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you have an ambition of where you want to be in 2030. Right? You have an ambition. In 11 years, 12 years, if somebody asks you, you can give an answer. कि मैं कहाँ रहना चाहता हूँ. तो मेरे को ये बताओ, CAT is a part of it. CAT is a part of the journey. Doing well in CAT is a part of the journey. Right? तो tell me one thing. अगर तुम्हारा इस साल का CAT अच्छा नहीं होता है, अगर तुम्हारा CAT इस साल का अच्छा नहीं होता है, तो क्या तुम इस ऑब्जेक्टिव को छोड़ दोगे? विल यू गिव अप, और विल स्टिल फाइंड अ मेथड टू कम बैक टू इट? एंड विल देयर बी अ वे बैक टू द एम्बिशन you have? And the answer is definitely yes. Just because CAT 19 did not go well, will it affect your ambition of 2030? If it does not, then how does the day matter? And ironically, the moment you define something like this, and you tell yourself what happens on that day is not going to be important for my outcomes in life, what will happen is the pressure. You'll suddenly start realizing that and this is the truth. I mean, there's absolutely no exactly, Jyoti. You never give up. You never give up on ambitions. You never give up on your dreams. The only thing you give up on is the control on things. You don't control everything that happens to you, and you understand that. And what happens to you in CAT 2019 will be best controlled if you allow your trained mind to be there. And the emotions are what are going to stop your trained mind to come from. So you have to be like a machine. You have to learn to be like a robot. And it is possible to do that within a week. Dissociate yourself from the result. Dissociate yourself from the outcome. A success in CAT should not make you very happy, because you're still going to have your struggles. I can tell you that. I'm an IIM graduate. And a failure in CAT should not make you very sad. Once you start understanding that both success and failure are just outcomes, and it does not change who you're going to be, the moment that you do that, ironically, you reach the exam without emotions. And if you're inside the exam, if you're without emotions, you have your best chance of cracking this exam, of doing or allowing your mind to do what it set out to. Right? Now, having said that, now this is basically the components of the last week's strategy. Right? If you have not studied some chapters, I typically don't advise you to study, except maybe a few chapters like permutation, combination, short chapters which can be done in two days, and you can expect to do a question on that. Chapters like permutation, combination, maybe arithmetic progressions, progressions overall. These are short turnaround chapters. अगर तुम्हारा portion नहीं हुआ है तो ये सब कर लो. 2-3 chapters का नाम मैं दे सकता हूँ. What else? Where else do we have time? Maybe stuff like interests, maybe stuff like mensuration. These kind of things you can still do. Maybe stuff like time and work. You can still do maybe a couple of these chapters, but again, this is only if you've hit a crisis that you're reaching the exam and you're not done most of the stuff. Right? Otherwise, my advice is nothing new in the last 1 week. Right? I'll take a separate session for CAT 20 as we move on through the year, and separate lot of sessions on CAT 20 etc. as we move on through the year. But we'll come back to that. Now, D-Day, on the day of the exam, have a good sleep, obviously. Be fresh for the exam. De-stress yourself. You have to reach the exam center, and your mind should be telling yourself inside out. It should be repeating this message over and over कि कुछ भी होने दो आज मैं डील कर लूँगा. मैं हूँ ना, मैं डील कर लूँगा. Remember the Shah Rukh Khan movie, मैं हूँ ना? So your mind should be telling yourself that I will be able to deal with it no matter what happens on the D-Day. रहने दो, कुछ भी हो, I will be able to deal with it. So this is the mindset you want to go into, and then you are telling yourself, okay, in that 1 hour, I'm talking about the QA section. In that 1 hour, I'm going to be a machine. I'm going to be a robot who has got no feelings. You cut my hands, you'll not find blood because I'm not a human being. I'm just a machine who's going to take inputs from the exam and give outputs for it. If 2 plus 2 is 4, there's no emotions in between. So once you hit the paper, inside the paper, the most important aspect is time planning and the execution of that planning. So when you're talking about time plans and the execution of those plans, remember one thing. One of the things that happens in the CAT is when you start off, you have 34 questions in quants expected this year, and you have 60 minutes time. And when you start off, you have 100% of your time left, full 100% of your time left, and full 100% of your questions left. Now what happens to most people that I see, what they do inside the test, inside the exam, is as time starts passing and it goes to the 20% time zone, 10%, 20%, 30% time zone, 40% time zone, the questions do not move so fast. So what happens to most people by the 24th minute in the section, 99% of the people in the exam will be on the 6th question, 7th question. So if you're on the 20th percent in terms of the questions and you're in the 40th percent in terms of time, so naturally what has happened is for the remaining questions, your time availability is squeezed beyond recognition. And once that happens, you will not be able to think straight at all in the exam. You'll be feeling as if you're solving with the ground beneath you being pulled out by someone. It's almost like you're standing on a carpet and somebody's pulling that carpet, and hence you're not able to stand straight. So the first and foremost part of the strategy on D-Day is that you don't allow this dichotomy to happen. If you are at the 40% mark on time, you should be at the 35 to 45% mark on questions. So broadly, if you break that down into your time zones in the exam, suppose we divide your exam into 6 time zones of 10 minutes each. On the D-Day, I'm talking about the D-Day. If you are talking about breaking your exams into 6 time zones of 10 minutes each, you have to break the 34 questions into 6 questions, 5 questions, 6 questions, 5 questions, 6 questions, or maybe a 6 question here and a 5 question here. The basic fundamental of D-Day performance is the more of the paper you see, the more your score will be. So what happens to people who create that mismatch? Time 60% हो गया, question हम 10वें question पे हैं, so I'm at 30% questions. So once that mismatch happens, time will start flowing very fast, questions will flow very slow, and then what will happen is when time runs out, when you reach 100% time, you are only at 60% of the questions, which means when you finish time, on 1 hour time frame when it's finished, you are at the 21st question, which means you did not see 13 questions. And by default, if you did not see 13 questions, you would have not seen around at least 5 easy questions would not have been seen by you. So you would have no chance of having solved them inside the test. So what your testing strategy has to be that you're never going to fall behind on the timeline and the question line. If it's 20 minutes down, you have to be on the 11th question. And just process what you can. What you do basically is, I'm not saying that you keep skipping all the questions, but what you do basically is, by the 10th, in the first 10 minutes, just make sure that you have solved at least 2 questions. Now, how much you are targeting will depend on your objectives. So if your objective is aggressive for quants, you are trying to solve 3 to 4 questions every 10 minutes. If you have an aggressive strategy because your skill level is good, so if you do that, you will be around 20 to 24 questions attempted in the exam. If you had done 20 to 24 questions last year in the exam, if most of them were right, maybe 1 or 2 wrong only, you'd get a score of 65, which will be a 99.8 percentile. Only 400 people would have got that score. So you and this, your decision about whether you're a 3-4 solver per 10 minutes or you are a 2 solver. Every 10 minutes you can do 2 questions, 2 to 3 maybe. In 1 or 2 odd 10-minute time frames you do 3, otherwise you are at least 2. So this would give you 15 attempts. If you, in this case, since you're solving less, if your accuracy objective is that I'll solve everything correctly, then you're still at 40-45, which will give you a high 90 plus percentile in the CAT 2018 kind of paper. And of course, if you go in with this strategy or you go in with that strategy, after the first 10 or 20 minutes, you need to evaluate whether this scoring rate is good enough. Right? So if the paper is turning out to be very simple and questions are very simple, you try to up the rate and you say, why not 5 per 10 minutes? If the paper is tough, you down the rate. Even if your initial target is 3 to 4, you might bring it down to, okay, 3 to karna start karna. So just keep that target, and if you're prepared well, you would have a fair idea about this. कि अगर तो कोई तुमको 10 मिनट देता है तो तुम कितने सॉल्व कर लेते हो उसमें. तो अगर तुम दो के सॉल्वर हो, 2 के लेवल पे हो स्किल वाइज, या 3-4 के लेवल पे हो, 3-4 के लेवल पे हो तो you should be able to get 99.5 plus percentile in the exam. Right? So I hope you guys enjoyed this thing. Just a small piece of information. I am teaching on Unacademy Plus, and I teach quantitative practice courses. DILR, of course, I do foundation as well as practice courses. I also do a little bit of verbal ability practice courses. And on Academy Plus, if you take a subscription, you have access to not just my classes but also classes from so many other educators. And there's a huge team of 25-30 educators who are teaching there. And if you want to join, this is the promo code. You'll get a 10% discount if you use this promo code on joining an Academy Plus through this promo code. So I wish to see some of you on my Plus classes. My 20 batch classes are starting in December, so you can come in into that. And that's all for today. And I would take leave. And thank you so much for being a patient audience. And thank you, Jyoti, for being communicative during the class. It was good talking to you. And I hope you enjoyed the session and gave you something valuable which you can use going forward. Chalo, bye bye everyone.